Think about going to Iraq as a band of 5 guys and you go to your first show and you have to sing for like 200 sober troops on the Syrian border. It's like, there
Oh
couldn't be anything
man.
more uncomfortable. I was like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? This is horrible, you know? So we had an NA beer fight on stage, like guys play guitar. You know, we just made it like a frat party.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. We are so glad you are here. Love seeing you all listen to these episodes week after week. It is our goal to bring you inspirational guests that help you transform your life, sharpen your mindset, and give you some mindset tools in your toolbox so you can live that abundant life. So we sit down with the best of the best and really dig into what makes them tick, unpack that, and apply that to others so you can use those tools in your own personal life. If you are a new listener or a loyal listener and you haven't left a review yet on the podcast store of your choice, if you could do that, that means a world to us here at the Mountain Tough team. We love seeing those reviews come through, and we're always trying to sharpen our skills as well. So let us know any feedback you have. Ratings and reviews also help with the algorithm, get these episodes out to more people to change more lives. So if you could do that, that would mean a ton to us here at Mountain Tough. Around the Mountain Tough Lab, there is a lot going on. I wanted to make sure you guys did know about the February challenge in the app. So if you don't have the app yet, you can download the Mountain Tough app from all the native app stores, Apple, Android, Amazon, Roku. It is available nearly everywhere on that 14-day free trial. So across all of the different programs for physical, mental, spiritual, nutritional betterment of you, we also have a monthly challenge. The February one is awesome. Make sure you check that out. That is one of those challenges that is going to help you level up to that whole new level. And there's a community of Mountain Toughers in there to support you along that journey. Today, we have a very special guest on the Mountain Tough podcast. Today's guest is Christian Schauf. He's a survival expert, adventurer, and founder and CEO of Uncharted Supply. This is a phenomenal conversation. I sit down with Christian and I really kind of unpack what it took to get to where he is now as the CEO of Uncharted Supply. And it is a phenomenal journey, the things that he went through to get there. He grew up on a Wisconsin dairy farm, so he had this unbelievable work ethic from childhood, manual labor outside, but he took a different trajectory with his life. He ended up being in a rock band with his brother and then playing for troops overseas for multiple years. And he really saw from that experience that people at home in America, especially where he ended up residing in California, can be completely unprepared for just a very simple natural disaster to a very complex natural disaster. There just wasn't quite enough preparedness there, both in their mindset and in their technical gear. So he founded Uncharted Supply and has built a great organization from that. Stand by for my conversation with Christian Schauf. I was really curious about kind of your childhood and that journey and kind of how it led to Uncharted.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in northwest Wisconsin. We had kind of several businesses. We had crops. We had this wood shavings business that my great grandpa had started. So basically, they would drive up to the northern part of the state in Minnesota, along the Great Lakes, and bring home like the wood shavings from all the lumber mills, and then we would use that as animal bedding. So we had that business going on with the crops. Most of the work really revolved around the dairy cattle. For people that aren't familiar with dairy cattle, like usually people milk cows twice a day. Like we milked them 3 times a day. It just felt like everything we did was like more work than it needed to be. But, you know, we washed our cows every day and let them out and rebed every day. And it was, my dad did a lot of stuff. My dad and mom did a lot of stuff with, genetics around animals. I mean, we sold the milk, but it was, I mean, I spent my childhood like going to cow shows. So you've probably seen like the Westminster dog show, right? It's like
Showing cows. Yeah.
swap out with dairy cows, and you have to wear all white, which I don't know who came up with that idea, because these cows, you know, crap everywhere and snot all over you. But yeah, man, like I couldn't play Little League growing up. Like I had to work. I joke with people. I literally have a scar from hernia surgery, you know, from elementary school, because I was throwing bales that weighed more than me all summer. And if I'm honest, like back then, I probably resented it to some level. You see your friends at the pool playing baseball, getting to do things, and we just couldn't. We had to work. But that was what my dad did when he was a kid. That's what my grandpa did when he was a kid, and you know, that's what me and my brothers were going to do. So, you know, on the other side of it, it wasn't just hard work. You know, my parents actually were pretty good, like business people and marketers, and we had clones on our farm. We were one of the first farms to do that. Like I said, a lot of genetic stuff of embryos and things like that. Like I remember one summer, I spent a long time in Scotland. My dad sent a bunch of embryos to Scotland, and those calves were born. And when they got to a certain age, I then had to fly out and get them ready to lead around and show for a sale. So we would sell animals in Scotland. So instead of like shipping animals over, you know, it was like, so it was always pretty creative. There was a lot of marketing around the brand of our farm, but at the base of it was a lot of hard work. And I think if I look at my life today, there's probably a lot of overlap from growing up that way and what I've chosen to do with my life.
For sure. Yeah. The farm and ranch ag community has so much hard work ingrained in it. And also it has a big entrepreneurial spirit as well, because you're always looking for ways to grow and to add additional like synergistic businesses. It's interesting because I have, in Montana, we have a lot of friends that are also in farm, ranch, and ag. And like mental toughness is not usually something they think or talk about. They've just been working hard since they were kids, and every generation before them was the same way.
Yeah, it's not even something you point at because it's so like in the DNA. Just, you don't talk about the sun coming up because it comes up every day. It's like the same thing with mental toughness, right? Like it's just inherent to everything you do. 100%. I have a lot of respect for people that do that with their lives, for sure.
Yeah, and you're building that grit at such an early age too. Not only the hard work, but like getting up early when it's cold, staying out late when it's cold, like taking care of those animals regardless of the weather. So like you're getting very used to being uncomfortable at a very young age.
Oh, I mean, you know, my dad would wake me up at 4:15, 4:30 in the morning, and there were a lot of times, you know, he'd come in, he'd flip the lights on, get up, and he'd leave, and somehow I'd fall back asleep with the lights on. So then he'd send the German Shepherds in, you know, to jump on the bed and to wake me up, or he'd bang on the window. And yeah, I mean, it was just, there was no escaping it. There was no like, I'm going to sleep in today. I remember having heat stroke and like hiding in the house, and my mom trying to protect me so I could hydrate. And my dad's like, no, we need him to work. So it's funny that I'm in survival now, because sometimes in survival, like it doesn't matter what your shortcomings are. If you've got a broken bone or a blister or whatever, you have to keep going. Right. Yeah. And that was very much kind of my childhood. And
do you have kids of your own now?
No, I'm single. No kids. I have a big dog. It's kind of my kid. He's always with me. He's laying right there. But
oh yeah, that is a big dog.
Yeah, he's a big dog, and that's my family so far. My business is really my kid, and not that I don't want to do that someday, but to date, it's escaped me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. How did you go from being a Wisconsin farm kid to getting into the Uncharted Supply Company? When did that whole journey start? Where'd that idea come from?
That's a long, winding journey. What's interesting is if I told you all the things I did in my life, it would seem very sporadic and all over the place. But what's interesting is it's all taught me something that's dovetailed into what I'm doing today. Like everything I've ever done has, when I started to have the ideas around Uncharted, I started to realize, wow, like I actually have a lot of experience, from a lot of different things I'd done previously that I hadn't really considered. So I grew up, on the farm. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I got 2 degrees there, and then did a certificate at the Berkeley School of Music. So after college, I was doing like web programming for like an agency in northern Wisconsin, and I was like playing in this cover band with my brother. And I just kind of always said I would keep playing in the band as long as it kept growing, and it just kept growing and growing. And being next to Minneapolis, we got into Minneapolis to record an album, and next thing you know, we're working with like Prince and the guys from the New Power Generation, and sharing a practice space with Soul Asylum, and quit my job, started kind of touring full time. Did that for about a decade,
Man.
and we had a good band. Our band was called Catchpenny. We toured. When it was all said and done, we toured all over the world, maybe 25, 30 countries, something like that. We sang the national anthem at NASCAR races in front of 175,000 people and played a lot of the coolest venues in the country. Did 3 albums, but
Wild.
It was weird for me being like an outdoors person and being a person that grew up on a farm to like try to sleep all day and play a gig at night and then drive all night. It always felt unnatural as much as I liked playing music. And I was kind of getting towards the end of wanting to do it. I don't know. I just was kind of feeling burnt out, and we were at South by Southwest, which is a big music festival. We got approached to go play for the troops overseas. And I thought, oh, this is a great capstone, kind of a great way to put a cherry on top of doing all this.
For sure.
Let's go do a tour.
Yeah.
So we spent 3 weeks over there, played a bunch of different countries, and then that turned into about a decade of touring for the troops overseas. So what my brother and I figured out was, sorry, it's a long story, but
no, this is awesome.
There was like 330 bases at the time during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and they were only really getting entertainment to about 30 or 40 of them because those 30 or 40 had landing strips. So bands would come over, they'd rent these huge, heavy PA systems from this place in Kuwait. They would drive into Iraq, they would load onto C-130s or C-17s, and then they could only go where there was a landing strip to play shows. So given the connections we had back in Minneapolis with just amazing sound engineers, we figured out how to build a speaker system, a PA system that would fit into a Black Hawk helicopter.
Man.
Which allowed us to drop into these 300 other bases.
These remote outposts.
The thing I didn't realize at the time was those 300 bases are smaller, they're more remote, they're more dangerous. A lot of forward operating bases, joint security stations for the military people listening. And the last thing you want to do is kind of fly into a little place without a lot of perimeter security and start playing a bunch of rock and roll through like hot rodded speakers, right? It didn't
just drawing some attention.
With the local community. So, I could write a book on the things that have happened on those trips. We played 150-ish shows. In fact, the guy in charge of programs submitted us to the Guinness Book of World Records as having played the most shows in combat of any entertainer ever. But because we couldn't reveal a lot of the locations we went to, like we didn't get the award.
What was the band called?
We did that. Yeah, we then, it started getting to be a lot. So we started sending other groups. We did action sports. We did a thing called Bikes Over Baghdad. We did, we would take over like System of a Down or Hubis Tank or the Pussycat Dolls. And either my brother or I or somebody else would go guide them around. So for years, we're going into these war zones. We're thinking about everybody's safety and scheduling and travel and transport and making sure people have everything. And that really instilled kind of a lot of probably what we're doing today in me, just living that way.
Yeah.
When I was home, I helped start a hard apple cider company with a guy named Joe Heron called Crispin. We sold that to Miller Coors. So that was really cool. Um, we we did a bunch of work with sponsors as part of these tours, like Harley Davidson and GoPro. So I started doing work for them back home. So my life got really interesting. I was working with big brands. I was working on marketing projects. I was doing entertainment overseas. Um, and then I took a job when it all kind of wound down at the end of the war. And, just the need for us doing what we were doing wasn't there anymore. So I took a job in Southern California and moved out there. And, it was just so arresting to me how different people were in like Newport Beach, California versus the farmers of Wisconsin and the military guys
Huge difference.
at the bases in Iraq.
Yeah.
It felt like everybody was dependent on their phone to fix everything. Everybody just kind of assumed things were going to be fine. Nobody was really thinking about what ifs. And me moving to, where there's earthquakes for the first time, thinking about things like that, it just struck me that, man, if something happens, like nobody has any idea of where to start. And that just is what really took me down the path to starting Uncharted.
Okay.
And so here we are today.
Dang, what a wild journey, man. That's crazy.
Long story.
Yeah. It's such a cool journey. Like all those experiences coming together, just building over time, and such a huge difference from being on the Wisconsin farm to being overseas playing music for our troops. That's wild.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much in between there. Starting the cider company, and then Harley Davidson liked what we were doing overseas. They had us help like plan their, I think it was 105th anniversary homecoming, and a lot of our ideas were like the core of that. I mean, it was pretty cool. How one thing just kept leading to another. But when I said things dovetailed, it's like I learned a lot about preparedness and survival, and I learned a lot about marketing and big brands and small brands and campaigns and all these different things. Even playing in a band and being in front of people and not having to do podcasts, I can speak without being nervous because I have so much experience just getting in front of people and doing something that's, dude, think about going to Iraq as a band of 5 guys and you go to your first show and you have to sing for like 200 sober troops on the Syrian border. It's like, there couldn't be anything more uncomfortable. I was like, what are we doing? This is horrible, So we had an NA beer fight on stage, like guys play guitar. We just made it like a frat party. But
that is awesome.
Solving that kind of stuff and putting yourself in the situations kind of builds a lot of resiliency for whatever comes down the road. Yeah.
For sure. What was the name of that band?
Our band was called Catchpenny.
Awesome.
Which that word is like, so when they used to sell newspapers on the street corner, like the extra guys, they didn't call it a headline. They called it a catchpenny, I believe, because newspapers were a penny, right? And that was what was grabbing your attention. And that was so we were trying to think of a fun name for, drawing a lot of attention to yourselves.
Yeah.
And that was the name.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired 2 together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages. And I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs or your kettlebell diesel. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Again, that's turtleboxaudio.com. You listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. Let's definitely fast forward to Uncharted Supply Company, because I want to dig in there and peel the onion back a little bit on that, because I know from my experience, like entrepreneurship is not easy. There's a lot of hard days. There's a lot of hard work. What has been your mindset in some of the kind of tools in your toolbox as an entrepreneur with Uncharted to kind of get it to where it's at today?
Well, when I started, there's like a certain amount of time where you can kick around an idea before you have to really like burn the ships, right? So I had this idea. I kind of kept fine tuning it around, hey man, there's nothing out in the space that I think looks like a modern day survival answer or preparedness answer for people. It was all just dusty backpacks and military surplus stores. Like, why isn't anybody doing this at a quality level of Nike or Apple or, one of those brands? And so I spent a lot of time, and you can invest time and a couple $1,000 here, a couple $1,000 there. There gets a point, I think, and I tell a lot of people this, where if you're going to do something, you really have to go all in. And for me, that was, writing a personal check that was most of my life savings to buy inventory. To start.
Dang.
And that's really a scary moment, but it's also a moment that kind of solidifies your path. There's no backing out at that point. I think without that moment, it's pretty easy for people to get disheartened, to lose interest, to focus somewhere else, to let it die on the vine, But I think when, I always tell people, like, make darn sure you really, really, really believe in this and that you're a person that can do this. And then you have to kind of like get married to it and commit. And there's no out until you figure it out. Because, they always say, what's the saying? Like, if you knew how hard it was going to be, you never would have started.
For sure.
I mean, 100%, 150% like that. At least in my experience, there's been way too many of those days. But you keep getting through them and you start going, okay, well, I didn't die that time and I didn't die that time. So I'm probably not going to die this time. So, let's get the heart rate down and figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the big thing really is just sticking with it. I mean, I've read books by Elon Musk and Richard Branson and Phil Knight, who started Nike, and all these guys. And there's not a single guy out there that hasn't literally been dead in the water at least once, twice, 5 times.
Yeah.
In building some of the biggest brands we know.
They never quit.
You have to accept that that's part of the journey. And you got to look yourself in the mirror and be like, can I figure it out or not? And if you believe in yourself, you'll figure it out. If you don't, it's probably your answer.
That's so helpful. And it's really interesting because in the Mountain Tough journey, I talk a lot about I was unintentionally put in a position of burning the ships. I didn't plan on burning the ships necessarily, but my starting journey for Mountain Tough is similar to yours, Christian, where I was bouncing around the world, and my wife and I were doing more missionary work in Africa. And we went from Ethiopia to Uganda, and it was just 24/7 adventure and adrenaline pumping days. And you're outside traveling around, meeting amazing people. And it was the most rewarding, coolest thing that we had ever done. And we thought we were going to do it for a long time. And my wife overseas got pregnant with our first daughter, and we came home to Bozeman to have her delivered in Bozeman with no plan B. We had no plan B at all. We were going to have her delivered and then stay with family for about 6 weeks, and then we were going to go right back to work overseas. And we didn't realize, we were very naive. We didn't realize what like taking care of a little baby, our own baby, was going to look like. And so when she was actually delivered, that's when it really hit us that like we're not going back right away. Like we have this little human that we have to provide for and protect. And just the travel logistics and health and safety alone, there was going to be some time where we weren't going back. And that's where I found myself in a burn the ships scenario that I didn't necessarily plan on. It was like the Mountain Tough ideas had been brewing for years, and the story had been coming together for years. But now I'm stuck in this moment with no plan B. And that was the time we went all in on it. And I tell people all the time, it was like the best thing that could have ever happened, because the amount of work it does take to get something off the ground, I think it requires in most cases that all in mentality.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's really it, is like, you can't really have a plan B. You can't, because you'll choose it.
Yeah.
Plan A will be really tough sometimes.
It's fascinating too, because you talk to a lot of special operations members that have made it through selection, and you spend a lot of time interviewing those folks on like who made it versus who doesn't. And, there's a lot to talk about there, but one very reoccurring theme is the successful side of folks that are making it through special operations selection are going with that I don't have a plan B mindset. They're not thinking like, if this doesn't work, I'll do X, Y, and Z. They're going in it with, this has to work. There's no plan B. And like, not only is that a main driver to business success, but it's also a main driver. It definitely is a mental toughness tool that works in an adventure scenario, a hunting scenario, a workout scenario. It's kind of, burning the ships can work in a lot of different facets of life.
And when you develop those habits, then that just becomes your normal state, right?
Yeah.
Makes everything just, I think, flow better, because you just know who you are and you know what you're going to do, and you stick with things for sure.
I think it would be helpful for the audience. Christian, can you tell us a little bit more about what Uncharted looks like today, what you have going on, and some of kind of your key core principles?
Sure. So, we, like I told the story, it really started with kind of, call it like a 72-hour bug out bag product. I wasn't even really thinking about a business. I just kind of made a product to see if that would sell. For several years, we, in the beginning, it was survival and preparedness. And what's a better word for preparedness? Because that feels kind of like, John Goodman in 10 Cloverfield Lane, that movie where he's just building this bunker and praying something happens so he can use it. And look, our business was spiky. When things would happen, people would come to us. But if it was calm and sunny, it was tough to sell that idea. I think humans are more reactive than they are proactive,
for sure,
generally speaking. So it took us a long time to kind of look ourselves in the mirror on that. And, I would say today, if you look at us, there's like two main buckets. And one is still preparedness. And we build a lot of products around that and stuff that is as good as anything out there, if not the best out there. And then we have what I would call prepared adventure. And the reason we did that was kind of multifaceted, but one, if somebody's building an overlanding rig, or if they're going backcountry hunting, or if they're mountain biking every day, they want to buy those pieces to add to their vehicle, to add to their kit. They know they need them. They know they're going out into the potential of something happening. So it gives you a more 360 approach to talking about, our mission and making sure people are safe. Like we like to say, get all the way out there and all the way home. So what does that mean? I mean, we're not just a survival kit company. What we try to do is look at what the highest probability emergency situations people are finding themselves in are, and then how do we create a product that solves for that if it doesn't already exist? So if you go to our website, you'll see survival kits, you'll see first aid kits, and you'll see first aid kits that are, 6 or 7 pounds down to 130 grams, because 130 ounces, sorry, like, cause you might want to have a little survival kit while you're trail running, or you're dropping your pack and you're going to go chase an elk, but you could always cut yourself with a broadhead, right? You don't want to have a kit that's 10 miles back at the truck and that's your only one and you didn't bring it because it's too heavy.
Yeah.
So we try to think of all those little steps. So we've got battery jump starters to start, internal combustion engines on vehicles, because dead batteries surprisingly create a ton of chaos for people every year, especially in times like this. And like, I have a buddy in Bozeman, my buddy Craig, works at Sitka. He's texted me 3 or 4 times in the last 2 days because they've been having this huge cold spell. And every time he starts somebody else's car, he's like, start another car with your Zeus. It's
Dude, those things are
that's
amazing.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, those things are.
Yeah, they're amazing. And it's
changer.
like, it's so simple, right? But like the difference between having that and not in different situations could be a convenience or it could be life or death.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're somewhere and it's 20 below and your car's not starting and nobody's coming and you don't have cell service, that's a very, very, very serious problem that's solved in like 15 seconds with one of those things.
Amazing.
Or you're at the Walmart parking lot and you can just be a good Samaritan. And hey, that's kind of good for the town and for culture and for karma too. So, we build a lot of different stuff now. We've picked some kind of verticals that we think are things that we understand well, that we have really strong partners in, that we think there's a need. So hunt, fish, overlanding, off-road vehicles. We call it fast mountain, which is like trail running, mountain biking, that kind of a thing. And the survival as well. And our goal is really to try to look at that space, figure out where things are happening and why there isn't a good solution, and create it if there isn't.
That's awesome. Yeah, the portable jump starters that you offer for cars is such a good example. I mean, you're spot on. It has been negative 20-ish in Bozeman since, the last 4 days. And so people are jump starting vehicles all over town right now. But there are so many situations where like you could have been out on a hike, you could have been waterfowl hunting, you could have been elk hunting in those similar type of temperatures that happens all the time in Montana. And now you're 27 miles from a paved road and you can't get your truck to start. That becomes a survival situation pretty quickly.
Big time. Or the opposite. A friend of mine down in Texas a couple times has been out hunting on their land, a long ways from service, a long ways from any roads, out on his family's property, and truck dies. And it's 108 or something like that. And 10 miles and 108 is also no easy task. So you just never know. It's good to have redundancies. It's good to have a plan. And especially, you've got a young family. If they're on the car and they're depending on you, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So for us, it's like, and we didn't come up with the original idea for a jump box. But what we look at is like, what are the things that are keeping people from using these? Like, how do we make it so simple that if you are completely freaked out and adrenaline's pumping and you can't even write your name because you're so nervous, can we still make something easy enough to work? That's going to have, like our jump starters have 8 shock proofs in them. So you put them on the wrong terminals, no problem. It just doesn't turn on. You don't blow it up. If they touch, it's fine. Things like that, so that it gives people a chance to be successful. I think that's really important, because people like you and I are going out and doing things where we learn these skills and it becomes second nature. But like I said earlier, when I moved to California and people just don't have the opportunity to go out and, how many of those people have started a fire when it was raining? It hardly ever rains there, let alone why you're starting a fire, right?
Yeah.
So it's like all those little things that you take for granted growing up on a farm or being a hunter, that our society is going away from, because we used to be a country of industry and agriculture, and now it's people are marketing managers and finance people, and that's not part of their daily life. So how do you help those people when the unexpected happens, and help them kind of not only take care of themselves, but maybe help their neighbor? And then, man, that at scale is a pretty cool mission, right?
For
if
sure.
Everybody can take care of themselves and help one person. That's a shift in what happens in an emergency in a big city.
Yeah, I love it. we talk a lot about at Mountain Tough. We actually have one of our ethos, our founding ethos and statements is always ready. And when we came out with that, we came out with it from the physical and mental standpoint. So we were talking about in a traumatic natural disaster, such as like a hurricane, tornado, tsunami, earthquake, you can see from history, like people that are physically and mentally in better shape have a much higher chance of surviving out of those situations.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you can physically walk and run and carry your family out of certain situations, you're a lot more prepared physically, but also always ready goes deeper than that for us. It's also like always ready is like if my daughter asks me to run a Spartan event in 2 weeks, I'm ready. It's not something that I have to say no to or I have to train for a year for. I'm kind of always ready is essentially being 80% prepared for anything in life that's coming your way. But then on these special missions or a very special trip, you can dial in that last 20%.
Right.
And as I've gotten older, that always ready mentality has definitely transitioned from just the physical and mental for me into more of a preparedness mindset across the board when it comes from not only physical and mental preparation, but also just preparation in terms of supplies, which is why we love so much what you're doing, because you're spot on that you need to be prepared for like if you're driving to a trailhead later today to go backcountry skiing, you can be at that 80% level of preparedness in your truck for what might come your way that day, in addition to your physical and mental preparedness. And it's just kind of having that baseline kit of things that are most likely to go wrong, and you're going to be ready for that situation. But then you can dial it up that last 20% if you're going on a bigger or a special expedition.
I mean, I have so many comments on that, and you're 100% right. I mean, I used to think that I was kind of unique in this, like always kind of training, and like you just said, like it's not just about being ready for a natural disaster. It's being ready because if your buddies call and it's like, hey, we're gonna go hike up to this peak tomorrow. Like, you can't be like, oh, I didn't train. Like you're ready, you can go.
Yep.
A couple of years ago, I had some buddies staying with me that had visited from out of town, and I came back from like my morning run, and my buddy's like, "What are you training for?" And I was like, "I don't know, life." I didn't think about it. And like, he's kind of a big marketing guy, and later he's like, "I get it." He's like, "You're just always wanting to be ready," and I'm like, I hadn't really thought about it, but like what you just said, like inherently was what I was thinking about too. I've done triathlons, I've done Ironmans, I've done marathons, and I've never trained for them.
Yeah.
Most of them I signed up the day before, honestly, like all the marathons I did. And I think for me, that's like my, my pop quiz, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
A gut
can
check.
I do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do it. Great. That's good. And you know, we at Uncharted, a couple of years ago, we started this thing called the 4 Pillars, which I built out with Travis Haley, who's a famous force recon Marine guy down in Phoenix. But
Yep.
he and I, you know, I was bothered because I get a lot of direct messages on Instagram and Facebook of people being like, the world's changing. I totally believe what you guys are saying at Uncharted. What should I buy? And for me to go, well, if you buy this kit, that's the answer. That's not the whole answer. That's dishonest of me, right?
Yeah.
And so I went to Travis and I'm like, how do you quantify the answer? Because it's really an accumulation of thousands of different skills and experiences, and being in shape and all those things, right? Like there's no like one 60-day training to be prepared.
It's a mindset.
I almost
too.
think of it like people say like they practice yoga. It's like you practice this. Like the minute you start saying you're an expert, I kind of don't believe you because there's always more to learn and more to be better at. So what we try to do, I mean, our pillars are mental and physical fitness, which we've talked to you guys about, resources, resourcefulness, and community. Travis and I decided that like in those buckets, you can kind of do everything. And so what we try to do is we put a newsletter out where we give you an article on each one of those buckets. It might be like layering for cold weather. It might be how to filter water. It might be things you should know about your community or things you can do. It's all over the place. It could be a workout. And my perspective is, if you get that email and you're like, I know how to do all those, great, wait for the next one. Or there might be one you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Like, let me dive in on that. It's really nonlinear, but it's just about stacking experiences and skill and being fit and being mentally tough and being ready, because you just, especially today, you never know when you're going to need it.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. It's a lifelong journey. It's a mindset. You can't be prepared for everything, so you have to constantly be learning and adapting, and you're going to change, and the society and environment's going to change. It made me think of, like, one of the most iconic survival books of all time is Deep Survival, and he talks a lot about the difference between, he studied what is the difference between people that most likely survive in a survival situation versus what's going on with most of the people that die in a survival situation. And like, you boil that whole book down, and the main thesis is the people that survive the most are the people that have this deep, deep layer of cumulative experiences. So they've tried a lot of different things. They've pushed themselves in a lot of different ways. They've been on different trips and different temperatures, so that when that survival situation hits, they're not as panicked as others because they have that deep layer of different experiences. So it's like, it's so interesting that survival and preparedness and the always ready mindset, it's certainly not something you can master and just call yourself squared away someday, because it's just constantly evolving and constantly changing.
I mean, I think of it too as like, you have a head start. Something happens and you're not sitting in your hands going, okay, what should we do? Like, you can move, right? And I think in most things in life, if you've done the planning, if you have the stuff, if you're ready to go, think how much time that saves you. And sometimes time is like the most important thing. My brain goes to wildfires or tsunamis or things like that. It's like that stuff starts happening and you can be out of your house in 20 minutes versus a day and a half. That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
So it just goes so far. I agree with you completely.
And one of your mottos, Christian, is life is not a dress rehearsal.
That's my personal motto for sure.
When did you come up with that? And can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Man, I don't know when I first heard that. It's been a long time. I definitely didn't come up with it. I heard it somewhere, but I mean, look, when today ends, you'll never get this day back. You never do. And maybe I just have like the worst FOMO of all time, but I think life is such a gift, and there's so many things you can do, or you can sit home and watch TV and look back and be like, oh crap, I've just wasted a huge amount of time. So, for me, it's that call to not be complacent and not take like the comfortable path of maybe like sleeping in. During elk season, I can actually, I can hunt a little zone before I get to work. They're either in there or they're not.
Yeah.
Right? But you got to go pretty early. And it's usually when it starts getting cold out and it's dark, it's starting to get dark. And there's all those things going against you where it's like, they're probably not there. I could probably sleep in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like literally some of the most magical moments I've had in the last couple of years are in those mornings, in those woods before work with the 2 hours I had. And it's like, I think the more experiences you have like that, the more you realize the value in like getting out there. Cause the one thing I know for sure is it's not going to happen if you stay in bed.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm not saying be a yes man and just agree to do everything all the time, but boy, I saw something the other day and it was like, you're never going to be this young and this healthy again, probably.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're all racing to the grave. And so it's like, why not go do these big things now?
Mm-hmm.
Because in 10 years, it's going to be even harder. And I don't know, maybe it's like a little sickness in my head, but I think about that stuff a lot, and it propels me to just do as much as I can, as often as I can.
I love that. Yeah, I talked to Brian Johnson yesterday, and he's the author of Arate, and Arate is a great kind of daily book. Each day is a golden nugget based off like 20 years of research on the Stoics and other philosophers. And in that, and when Brian talks, sometimes he has an analogy of like what a potential worst case of hell could look like from a different sense. But he talks about if you imagine your life now and doing the things that you should do, that you want to do, waking up early, working on your physical, mental health, your spiritual health, pushing your limits, chasing something of purpose and meaning, pursuing that virtuous life. If you do that for the next 20 years, and 20 years from now is your last day, that's your death day. And if you decide to not do those things, you're not going to do those things. You're going to live a complacent life. You're going to live a life of mediocrity. You're going to sleep in. You're going to watch TV. So you have your virtuous self and you have your complacent self. In both of those, if you imagine a death day on your deathbed 20 years from now, the version of hell that he describes is you chose that mediocre path, that complacent path, and you're laying in that deathbed.
Yep.
And right before you take your last breath, that virtuous self walks in the room, and you see them, and you kind of feel their energy and their power and their presence as they walk in that room, and realize that path and where it took them. And then you take your last breath and pass away.
Ugh.
And it's like, man, like it's such a great description of the difference. And you can see that difference in even taking those steps for 2 or 3 years, the difference in yourself versus not taking those steps. So imagine what that looks like 10, 20, 30 years.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, it's funny how alike you and I think. I have that conversation all the time with people. It's like, no matter how hard like building this business gets, I still choose that over being in my deathbed and looking back and not have tried.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know? I mean, one of my favorite poems or speeches is "The Man in the Arena." You know, I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I have it in my office. Yeah.
Yeah, that gets me fired up, man. I think about that a lot. And that's the world we live in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's poking at you and pointing and waiting for you to fall. But like, there's less and less people that are willing to actually step outside of that, because our world is really encouraging comfort and complacency more and more, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's getting harder to buck that and to fight against that. And I think if you do, it's a whole different life. Like you said, there's a whole different path ahead of you.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I mean, I definitely sleep in some mornings, I'm not going to lie, you know, but I think if, you know, 8 or 9 times out of 10, you can get up and you're a lot further down that path than you were if you didn't at all.
For sure. Yeah. I did want to dig in a little bit on kind of what some of your protocols and training looks like now. What does kind of your typical training throughout a week look like from a physical perspective?
Yeah. So, and you might hate this, but I don't do much when it comes to like a really structured plan.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of reasons around that. There's a lot that involves travel and schedule that's changing all the time. I've actually been injured a lot the last 4 or 5 years. I've had a lot of like shoulder and elbow type stuff, which kind of, you know, you got bad tennis elbow, and it kind of shuts down all sorts of things you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, you know, so like typically I wake up, I'll run 4 or 5 miles every morning. In the summer, I run outside with a weight vest. I wear like a 30-pound weight vest in the summer. And then in the fall, it switches to a heavy like ruck pack as I get into like hunting season. But so in the mornings I do that for 2 reasons. One, helps me kind of think about my day, what I need to do, helps me unknot problems that I've probably been tossing and turning with all night. I feel like the ideas always come to me when I'm doing, you know, longer cardio.
For sure.
2, it wears out my dog so he doesn't bother me all day. Because if I don't wear him out, he's scratching at the door like every 20 minutes. So checks a bunch of boxes.
Yeah.
And then after work, I usually run again a couple miles just to give my dog another run and kind of stretch out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I usually go to the gym. And I kind of, like I said, I've been injured, so I kind of work on whatever I can. I've trained, when I lived in Minnesota, my buddy was a head strength coach for the Minnesota Wild. And I got to train with that hockey team for several years. And those are the hardest workouts I've ever done in my life. And I've trained with a lot of people.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from them. I learned kind of how to think about heart rate and recovery times and, you know, what to do every different. So I'm sure with you, even if you're not following a strict plan, you can still get in a heck of a workout.
For sure. Yeah.
So for me, a lot of times it's like, okay, you know, what feels good? What haven't I touched? What's sore? What's not sore? And then I try to get after it for like an hour. Just go really hard. Then I usually end with 20 minutes in the sauna. I put on a podcast. And I usually go home and work until I fall asleep.
Yeah.
So that's typically like my work week workouts. On Sundays, I usually do some sort of long form cardio. The summer, it's a 10 or 15 mile run. I used to cycle a ton, you know, did triathlons and stuff. So maybe it's a long bike ride, but I try to get one of those in a week.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you know, like on a Saturday or Sunday, it just kind of sets me up for the next week because it puts you in a sedative state that nothing else does, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
3 hours on a bike or 100 miles or something like that. The next day, you're happy to sit in your chair. So
yeah.
This time of year with the snow, we just got snow. So sometimes my morning runs turn into ski tours with my dog. So we'll go out 5 a.m. and go up a mile, mile and a half, 2 miles. And, you know, that's usually depending on if I'm ungroomed or if it snowed and I'm pushing through 2 feet of snow. and ski down and go to the office and start work that way. So that's kind of, and then like you said, that you're 80% of the way there. And if there's something coming up, I dial in for it.
Mm-hmm.
If I know there's a race coming up or a hunt, I start working on carrying more weight or deeper lunge. I work on my, lower body, whatever it is. I kind of dial it in based on what's happening. But that's generally how I approach it. I fully admit I could probably be stronger if I was following a training plan. The other half for me is I like having the time to think and kind of process the day. And when I do it this way, it allows me to kind of, I don't want to say relax, but allows my mind to drift a little bit. And I've found that really useful in building the business. So
for sure,
that's how I do it.
Yeah, the ideas you can generate and clear your head on some of that longer cardio are amazing. Like a nice long run. So many business ideas can come out of that.
Oh yeah. I don't know how many times I've solved all the problems in the world on a run, When you get back and write it down, the endorphins wear off. You're like, that's an okay idea. It wasn't, you're on a run, you're like, oh my gosh, here it is. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach it.
And then I noticed also on your Instagram, you have a key verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yeah, I've got that tattoo right here actually too.
Nice. Yeah. What is kind of like your mental, spiritual regimen look like?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a very Christian household and maintain that to the best of my ability today. I got that tattoo. It has the Bible verse and it says, Fortes Fortuna Adiove, which means fortune favors the bold, right above it.
Yeah.
Frankly, I saw those two messages when I was overseas all the time, whether it was painted on a wall or wherever. And we were doing stuff where we didn't get into it too much, but there were plenty of days where I didn't know if we were going to make it through the day on these trips, whether it was, surface air missiles at our planes or sniper fire when we landed or IEDs knocking us over, just kind of crazy. Like I always tell people like, look, I wasn't a troop. I'm not a cowboy, but I was definitely a rodeo clown. Like we were in the arena and doing some kind of sketchy stuff here and there. So there were just moments where I'm like, is this worth it? And that was kind of a reminder to me that like, not to borrow from the Blues Brothers, but like we're kind of on a mission from God here. Like we were approached to do this and we uniquely could do it very well. And my perspective was then we should keep showing up as long as we can. And if we can help people and I didn't get into the psychology of what we learned about providing entertainment for people and the things that happened, but I do believe that giving people a reprieve was really powerful
for sure
for them mentally. And so that was just kind of my little reminder. And I think that kind of serves every day,
Yeah.
Like if you're living in the light, doing the things you should be, using the gifts you've been given, you have to trust that you're on the right path and not be afraid.
I love that. That's really helpful. Yeah, that's very helpful too in just terms of we are seduced a little bit in a way, especially now more than ever before, to think, and we're kind of taught, and in media is probably pouring some gas on this, but in a lot of ways where society is trying to convince us that life should be pretty easy. But I think it's the opposite that's true, that like life should be hard, and hard is good in a lot of ways. And doing hard things is great, and we can do hard things. And so that verse is so extremely helpful from that perspective, that like God does give us the strength to do the things we're supposed to do. And, following that path, that strength just kind of shows up out of nowhere, and sometimes you can't even communicate like how you're getting through certain situations. The strength is just there in a profound way.
100%. I mean, what's the Prefontaine quote? It's like to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift, right?
Yeah.
Like I think about that in a lot of times, like when my heart's at, I'm 30, or I'm sorry, I'm 43 years old. And it's like, think of 220 minus your age on the heart rate. And, I'm buzzing at 190 something uphill at a weight vest. I think about that quote. Or when I want to close my computer without finishing something that I know could be better. Look, I think humans have so much ability and so much opportunity and so much they can do. And I agree with you. I think, without getting too conspiracy theorists, it's just that, I think complacency is like the biggest poison that can get into a person. People ask me all the time, like, what do you think is going to happen? What should I prepare for? And I always just say, like, I have no idea, but I do know that, like, the less dependent you are on anyone else, the better off you're going to be. And a lot of that comes back to this, right? It's like, have you done everything you can? And are you as strong as you can be and as educated as you can be and all those things, right?
Yeah.
But I think you start taking the easy path and that leads to maybe it's being out of shape. Maybe it's being sick. Maybe it's, I don't know, not learning the skills you could have.
Yeah.
I believe that's going to come back and bite you. So my, my recommendation is to not go down that path and go the other way. Do hard things.
For sure.
It's only going to be like, what do they say? Like, everything's hard, like a workout's hard, but being fat is hard. So which one do you want to pick?
It's so accurate.
There's some truth there.
Yeah. It's so accurate. Well, Christian, thanks so much, man. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got a lot going on.
No, man, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I was really stoked to finally connect with you. We've been following you guys and paying attention to what you have going on for a long time. And you guys are doing amazing things in helping people in a lot of really cool ways. And, it's helped me as well personally. And I think that you guys are doing some great work to support the globe in this preparedness fashion, because you do get in situations where you need these things. And I've been there, and sometimes it's a big thing. Just the other day, a truck rolled over in front of us on the interstate and we had to jump out and help the guy.
Whoa.
And like having the right kit in your truck versus not in those situations is really helpful. And then, sometimes it's bigger than that. Sometimes it's smaller than that, but you guys are doing great things, and it's awesome. And I definitely give you a lot of credit for, staying in that arena and just not quitting, because that's a big part of it.
That means a lot, man, especially coming from you. Thank you. I think we probably all, we're all like in our little caves working away, wondering if it's worth it, wondering who's paying attention, if the benefit's out there. It always feels really good to know that somebody's watching and appreciates it. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think about that a lot. So it means a lot. Thank you. And congrats on everything you've built too, man. It's like, it's all inspiring, right? It makes me want to push harder when I see other people doing well. It's like, it's motivation. So
for sure.
It's awesome.
And where can people find out more about you and Uncharted Supply Company?
Yeah. We buy enough ads. If you just type in Uncharted Supply anywhere, something should show up. But, our website's unchartedsupplyco.com. The Instagram's just at Uncharted Supply Co. Mine's just at Christian Schauf. That should get you down the path. Yeah.
And then on your homepage, that's where you can sign up for the newsletter that's going to kick out those tips.
Yeah, just scroll down a little bit. You'll see it there. You'll start getting an email flow where you get emails every week with pretty cool topics. There's a huge library of stuff there. And, this year, I know you guys are going to help us with that a little bit on the fitness side of things. My goal is I don't want this to be the world according to Christian in any way. It has to start there, right? I have to get it going. But, my goal is to bring in the most kind of educated voices in the world on all these different topics and hear different people's perspectives on things people should do.
Yeah.
I mean, this month we had an article from Pat Hemingway, his great grandpa was Ernest Hemingway on how to adventure, and it was
Man.
like, that was a fun one for me to read. We've got John Barklow on there. He's at Sitka and he was cold weather warfare trainer. And, we've got doctors, we've got athletes, and there's some stuff from you guys. And I think that my hope is it becomes a really valuable resource for people that are wanting to take a step and don't know where to start, and they can just start chipping away at it and get to a place where they can be part of the solution when something happens. So that's really the goal.
Yeah, that's a great step to just keep adding those cumulative experiences too.
Yep.
Well, thanks, Christian. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you being on the show, and have an awesome day, man. Get out there and do some backcountry skiing.
Couple hours. I'll be out there for sure.
Thank you.
You bet. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. That was a great conversation with Christian. Man, it really hit me hard when he dropped that one-liner that he's kind of well known for spreading this message. Life is not a dress rehearsal. Think about that. Think about, we really only do get one chance on this rock, one chance on this planet. We only get one shot at our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. There is no second run. So truly, life is not a dress rehearsal. And if we can think that way, we can always put our foundation back on what the Stoics called memento mori. Remember, we will die, and base your decisions on that we're not getting a second chance at this life. And that really helps him move forward, face these challenges, take on some risk, because we only have one shot. Thanks so much for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. Remember, you can keep up with Christian by following him on Instagram at Christian Schauf. That's Schauf for his last name, Schauf. And make sure to leave us a rating review if you haven't done so already. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And you can get all of these podcasts on YouTube as well at Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.